Days is more than a podcast. It's a movement. It's for the first responders, the veterans, healthcare professionals, and all of their families. This is Brewing Better Days. And now your host, Eric Hadley.
Don't forget that's a 32.
Have you ever felt like doing the right thing in business just doesn't work anymore? Like kindness makes you look weak and generosity gets taken for granted? I've been there personally, professionally, spiritually. A few years ago, I was rebuilding my life after losing my job, fighting for custody of my son, grieving the loss of brothers and sisters in arms, and wondering what happened to a country that used to honor its heroes. And in the middle of all that, I found a book, The Go-Giver. It reminded me of who I wanted to be, not just in business, but in life. Those 5 laws of stratospheric success help shape the foundation of Got Your Six Coffee Company. They're woven into everything we do, supporting those who serve one cup at a time. Today, I'm honored to speak with the man behind that book. Bob Burg is the co-author of the Go-Giver series, a global best-selling movement that's helped millions rediscover the power and value of service and authentic influence. We're diving into why generosity and capitalism aren't opposites, they're partners. So grab your coffee and let's brew better days together with Bob Burg. Bob, how are you today?
Wow, what a great introduction, Eric. Thank you for having me with you. And, before anything, I just want to say thank you and thank you to all the veterans for who you are and for what you've done. You make a magnificent contribution to our country, and I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, sir. So, Bob, welcome to Brewing Better Days, the Coffee Shop Talk podcast. I always kick this off with a simple question. Bob, are you a coffee drinker? And if so, what's your favorite roast or preparation style?
Well, I would say it's Rachel's Famous Coffee, which, of course, from reading the book, you'll know what that is, even though it is actually a fictional coffee brand. So I had told you I tried to order from your site, but didn't have the, what do they call, the little pods. And so I'm working on getting something so that I can still order your coffee and have it in a regular brewing thing. So,
well, and to that, I too am also working on taking care of that for you. So I appreciate that. So like I said in the introduction, back when I started Got Your Six Coffee Company, it was kind of baptism by fire. I was in a dark mental headspace. I was on the backside of losing my uncle to a failing VA system. I wasn't happy with what I was seeing in society, with how heroes were being treated. I could point to 13 brothers and sisters at the time that thought suicide was the answer, and it wasn't in the right mental headspace, and I was kind of pissed off at the world. And I started this company with this crazy idea that I was going to use 100% of the net profit to prove the mission. And we did that for several years, but it kind of, I guess you could say, reared its ugly head about 6 years in. But in the beginning, I tripped upon your book series and it just resonated with me to the core. I remember back then reading the book and listening to it, and it really spoke to me. And I recently just got back from going to the NRA convention last week. And during my 22 hours of road time, I made sure to re-listen to the book. And it's lighting another fire under my rear end. And I greatly appreciate you for putting that out there. It's an amazing series.
Well, thank you. And I had a brilliant co-author, John David Mann, who was really the lead writer / storyteller, because I'm a how-to author. Every book I've written had always been how-to books, which is fairly simple. I mean, you put down what you know, or what at least you think you know, and you put that in and so forth. But this was different. It was a business parable. Right. So while it was based on proven principles, it's still a story. It's still a work of fiction. And I never could have done with that what John did. So I just sing the guy's praises, and he's such a good guy and so humble, he'll never say it himself. But boy, it was a great joint effort, but this guy was really good.
He is amazing for sure. For listeners who haven't read The Go-Giver, what's the heart of the message?
The basic premise, Eric, is simply this, that shifting your focus, and this is really where it all begins, shifting your focus from getting to giving. Now, when we say giving in this context, we simply mean constantly and consistently providing immense value to others, understanding that doing so is not only a more fulfilling way of conducting business, it's the most financially profitable way as well. And not for any kind of way out there, woo-woo, magical, mystical type of reasons. Oh, just give and good things. No, it's actually much more logical, much more rational than that. When you're that person who can take your focus off of yourself and focus on serving others, discovering what they need, what they want, what they desire, when making it not about you, but about helping them to solve their problems and challenges, when it's not about you, but instead moving other people closer to happiness, people feel good about you. They feel great about you. They want to get to know you. They like you. They trust you. They want to be in relationship with you. They want to be part of your world. They want to do business with you, and they want to tell the world about you, or as Sam and the Go-Giver called it, they want to be your personal walking ambassadors.
So true. What inspired you and John to write this little parable?
So years ago, back in the 90s, I had a book called Endless Referrals. And back at the time, and the subtitle was Network Your Everyday Contacts into Sales. And back in the day, it was one of like 3 books out there on networking. Now there's hundreds of them, and and I've read many of them, and I learned from all of them. But back then there were only a few of them. This was one of the first, and it was really written for entrepreneurs and salespeople who knew they had a great product or service. They knew it brought wonderful value to their customers, but they didn't necessarily feel comfortable or confident in developing and cultivating the kinds of relationships in their communities that would cause people to want to do business with them directly and or refer them to others. So it was a how-to based on my relationship building system. Now, I personally define a system, and I'm always annoyingly defining things, so we'll probably do that several times during this conversation. But I define a system as simply the process for predictably achieving a goal based on a logical and specific set of how-to principles, the key being predictability. Excuse me. In other words, if it's been proven that by doing A, you'll get the desired result of B, then all you need to do is A and continue to do A and continue to do A, and eventually you'll get the desired results of B. That was a system. It was based on a premise, which is that all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust. And the book was basically the system on how to get there. So it was a how-to book. It was a very successful book, and I was grateful for that. But I always loved reading business parables ever since I'd been in sales. I started in sales 40 years ago. And whether it was books like The Greatest Salesman in the World, like by Og Mandino, or The Richest Man in Babylon by Klassen, or books such as Doctors Blanchard and Johnson's 1 Minute Manager. And today you've got people like John Gordon and Chris Widener and so many others, Andrea Waltz, Richard Fenton, who write these great parables. I always enjoyed it. And I think the reason why is because they're stories, and stories connect on a deeper, more heart-to-heart level than a how-to book. Now, again, I love how-to books. I write how-to books, and I read lots of how-to books. But there's something about a parable that just really hits the heart. And so I thought, wouldn't it be great if we could take the basic premise, basic idea of this and turn it into a parable? But again, not a parable writer, so I kind of sat on the idea. And then in the early 2000s, I got to meet John David Mann because he was the editor-in-chief of a magazine I was writing for. And he was so good at what he did. Even back then, he had a great reputation. And, he would edit my articles, send them back to me every month. But he was so humble, and it was always, I did this, is it okay? Which editors, doesn't have to do. He always did. And our running joke was that I'd always send back the article saying, John, not only was it, was this good, you write my stuff better than I write my stuff. And again, he's a person of such high character that I took this idea to him, about the story. And he was very busy. He wasn't as well known as he is now, but he was still very, very busy. So he didn't know if it was something that he would take on. And then one weekend, he and his back then fiance, now his lovely wife, Anna, they were in the Tampa area visiting her mom, and they took a 4-hour drive across state to Jupiter, where I live. We had about a 3-hour dinner just discussing what it would be about, and about 3 weeks later, he called me back, said, I think we got something here. Let's do this. So the interesting thing is, and again, because of his great writing, it only took us a few months to complete the story. The tough part was getting it published because our agent went through 24 no's, 24 rejections from New York publishing houses before the 5th one finally said yes. And and they turned out to be the perfect publishing partner. Portfolio, which is an imprint of Penguin Random House, and it's just been a great relationship we've had.
It's one of the things that I've learned throughout my experiences and just interacting with people is how many people, when they hit that first no, they're done. They give up. And seeing the persistence is very encouraging and inspiring for others. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Can you walk us through the 5 laws and how they apply beyond entrepreneurship?
Sure. And well, so let's take it from, because it starts with entrepreneurship. I mean, basically, it's a book for entrepreneur and salespeople, but a lot of leaders, corporate leaders and organizational leaders have used that as a leadership book as well, because, like anything else, universal laws apply across the board. They also apply to all forms of success, whether we're talking financial, physical, spiritual, mental, emotional, social, relational, and so forth. So, laws are laws. So, and I like to say that there's nothing in the book, as we talk about the laws, there's nothing original in it, right? And, these are all tried, proven from as far back as there have been market economies, and I would imagine people working together with others. And I remember when the book first came out, and it got off to a really good start, and we'd be interviewed, and people say, so what is it about this book that you and man have done that's anything new? And I'd always say, nothing, which I get the answer that, I was supposed to provide. But, we may have put it in story form and so forth and explained it in a certain way, but no, there's nothing new. I always remember the old great business philosopher, a very successful man by the name of Jim Rohn, used to say, beware the person who comes to you promising new fundamentals, right? It just ain't gonna happen. It's not. And so yeah, the laws themselves are the laws of value, compensation, influence, authenticity, and receptivity. The first one's the law of value. And in this one, Eric simply says, your true worth, in the business sense, of course, your true worth is determined by how much more you give in value than you take in payment. Now, when you first hear this, it's a little bit counterintuitive. Give more in value than I take in payment? I mean, isn't that a recipe for bankruptcy? So we simply have to know the difference between price and value. Price is a dollar figure. Okay, it's a dollar amount. It's finite. It is what it is. It's the price. Value, on the other hand, is the relative worth or desirability of a thing, of something, to the end user or beholder. In other words, what is it about this thing, this product, service, concept, idea, coffee, what have you, that brings so much worth or value to another person that they will, in this case, say, willingly exchange their money for it and be glad they did, while you also make a very healthy profit, and this is something, we need to talk about here as well after your experience in those first few years, because there was obviously one missing piece, okay, which is very natural to have happen. So you're certainly not the only one. So that's the law of value. May I provide a quick example?
Absolutely.
Are you a conservative patriot that loves God and country? Then we've got the most delicious coffee made just for you. Got Your Six Coffee supports veterans and first responders. We use the power of coffee to brew better days by making a difference in our community for these heroes. Got Your Six Coffee is freshly roasted and winning awards. Together, we raise our mugs and say thank you to those who have our backs. Order Got Your Six Coffee today.
Okay, so let's say you hire an accountant to do your taxes, and she charges you, and we're just going to name a round figure, $1,000. That is her fee, literally her price, $1,000. But what's the value she gives you in exchange that makes it so worthwhile? Well, through her years of experience, her getting to know you, taking the time to get to know your needs, wants, and desires, what you're looking to accomplish, getting to know your business, getting to know she's able to save you $5,000 in taxes. She also saves you countless hours of time, and she provides you and your family with the security and the peace of mind of knowing it was done correctly. So she has given you well over $5,000 in value in exchange for a $1,000 fee or price. She literally gave you more in value than she took in payment. So you feel great about it. But she also made a very healthy profit because it was, to her, it was worth it to lease, if you will, her time, her energy, her knowledge, her wisdom, right, for that $1,000. So, in fact, in any free market-based exchange, and I first learned this from one of my libertarian heroes, Harry Brown, he used to say this, in any free market-based exchange, when we say free market, we simply mean no one is forced to do business with anyone else. People are doing so on their own volition. That is what free market capitalism is, okay? In any free market-based exchange, there should always be two profits. The buyer profits and the seller profits, because each of them come away better off afterwards than they were beforehand. And that's the beauty of capitalism. Now, of course, too many people, we can talk about this later, too many people misunderstand capitalism. They confuse it with cronyism, or they can, with other things, which is not free market. It's free market capitalism, which is what works for everyone. Now, but here's the thing. So both parties come away a winner, but it happened because the accountant was not focused on her fee. She was focused on the immense value she was providing you. The fee was the result. This is why John and I, in our follow-up book, Go Givers Sell More, one of the most famous quotes from there was, and of course John thought of this one, not me, but it was that money is simply an echo of value. Money is an echo of value. It's the thunder to value's lightning, meaning nothing more than that the value must be the focus, right? The money you receive is a natural result of the value you've provided. And that's the key to it all. That's in essence the law of value. Should I go on to the second law, or?
Absolutely.
Okay. So this one is the law of compensation. And the law of compensation says your income is determined by how many people you serve and how well you serve them. So where law number one says to give more in value than you take in payment, law number two tells us that the more people whose lives we touch with the exceptional value we provide, the more money with which we'll be rewarded. So your accountant, the first example, she did a great job of giving you more in value than she took in payment. You feel great about her. You would probably use her services again. You'd probably refer her to others. And her other clients feel the same way about her. So our accountant is very quickly amassing that army of personal walking ambassadors we discussed earlier. And as she continues to add more and more value to the lives of more and more people, her income will continue to grow and grow. This is one reason why we're such big believers in referral-based business, because what you're doing is you're allowing yourself through referrals, the recommendations and introductions of others, you're allowing yourself to touch the lives of more people. And so, for example, with referred prospects, it's easier to set the appointments, right? Because you're going in on borrowed influence. With referred prospects, price is less of an issue. Doesn't mean it's a non-issue, but it's less of an issue because you're going in on that borrowed influence, that borrowed trust. You've got that gravitas, so you can sell on high value rather than low price. So here's the thing. When you sell on low price, you're a commodity. When you sell on high value, you're a resource. Okay. And that's so very key. Another benefit of a referred prospect is it's simply easier to complete the sale. Why? Because of borrowed trust, or what we call vicarious experience. So no, this person may have never done business with you before, but someone who they know, like, and trust has said, oh, this is the only person you need to even talk to. The product is great. They take wonderful care of it. They back up everything they do. They make it all about you, the customer. They return phone call, right? And that's obviously a lot easier. And then the fourth benefit of a referred prospect is they're already of the mindset that that's how you do business. So in their world, in their paradigm, if you will, they see you as a sales professional or entrepreneur who meets people through referrals, meets their prospective customers through referrals, who sells on high value rather than low price, who completes the sale, and who is then referred to others. So as Nicole, the CEO in the story, one of the mentors, told Joe, the protege, the law of value is about your potential income. But it's not enough to serve just one person, right? The law of compensation is about your actual income, because it's all about how many lives you impact. Now, by the way, you would ask about, in leadership and so forth. So same thing. A leader who's focused on giving more in value than they take in payment, they've got loyal people. That doesn't mean you pay an employee more than what they bring to the table. Of course not. You'd go broke that way. It means that you make their employee experience so fantastic, so life-affirming, so terrific that they love working for you, right? And they love the value they provide to you. And yes, they feel good about the salary they're receiving, but they also feel great about the autonomy that you provide them, about the relationships they're able to develop at work, about being able to improve themselves and build on themselves, about, being cared about as someone more than just a number, more, right? And they're giving that great value to you. They're giving more value to you than they're receiving in payment, and you're giving great value to them, right? And so both of you are winning, right? And that's the thing about with leadership. People aren't going to follow you because let's put it this way, and let's go back to sales for a second. And when I used to speak at sales conferences, I'm retired from the road now, so I do a lot of virtual keynotes, but I don't travel anymore. But when I did, I used to speak at these huge sales functions. And the first thing I'd often say is, nobody's going to buy from you because you have a quota to meet, right? They're not going to buy from you because you have a sales goal or because you need the money, or even just because you're a nice person, even though you are. They're going to buy from you only because they believe that they will be better off by doing so than by not doing so. Again, that's why free market capitalism works so well, because everybody does it because it's going to benefit everyone involved, okay? Now, it's the same as a leader. Nobody's going to follow you because you have a certain goal. They're not going to follow you because you think you're the best leader and everybody should agree with you, right? They're not going to follow you just because you're a nice person. They're going to follow you because you found a way to make your goal tie in to their goals, tie into their needs, their wants, their desires, okay? To help them feel better about themselves. And so, so each party is giving something to the other person that other person values more than they value what they're exchanging, while they're receiving more in value than what they're exchanging. I mean, it's just so beautiful how it works.
Absolutely.
It's not a limited pie. It's an expansive pie. And now law number 2, same thing. It's great if you have a follower, right? A team member. But see, you really can expand and grow your influence when what? You have a whole lot of team members, right? So now we get to that next part. Number 3, the law of influence. And this says influence is determined by how abundantly you place the other person's interest first. Now, again, this one sounds so very counterproductive, maybe even Pollyanna-ish. How can your influence be determined by placing other people's interests first? Okay, so let's explain something. Let me qualify this, if I may. When we say place the other person's interests first, we do not in any way mean you should be anyone's doormat or a martyr or self-sacrificial. Absolutely not at all. It's simply understanding, and something we already brought up earlier, but I want to expound on it if I may. It's just understanding, as Joe, the protege, learned from several of the mentors. The golden rule of business, sales, and we'll say leadership is that all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to and allow themselves to be led by those people they know, like, and trust. Now, here's the thing, Eric. There's no faster, more powerful, more effective way to elicit those feelings toward you from others than by genuinely moving from that I focus or me focus that most people are stuck in to that other focus. Looking to it, Sam, one of the mentors, advised Joe, make your win all about the other person's win. And that's the key. That's the key to influence, right? Law number 4, the law of authenticity. And this one says the most valuable gift you have to offer is yourself. And in this part of the story, one of the mentors, Deborah, shared a great lesson that she learned, and that is that all the skills in the world, the sales skills, technical skills, people skills, as important as they are, and they are indeed all very, very important, they're also all for naught if you don't come at it from your true, authentic core. But when you do, when you show up as yourself, day after day, week after week, month after month, people feel good about you, sure. They feel comfortable with you, absolutely. They feel safe with you. And why wouldn't they? They know exactly who they're getting. And that kind of consistency, that's an element of human nature that we want to be able to, we have the need to try to make sense of our world, this in a world that often doesn't make sense, right? And so if we're going to trust someone, we've got to feel as though we know who they are, right? And, so authenticity is just, it's so powerful. It's so important when it comes to building a sustainable reputation, a sustainable business, a sustainable team. Now, I would, if I may, like to just share a thought about authenticity, something I've noticed, and really to me, it's been since the proliferation of social media. And it seems as though the term authenticity has almost been hijacked to mean no boundaries. Just let it hang out. Just say whatever you want, whatever you feel. It doesn't matter who you insult or offend or the language, or, whatever, just as long as you're authentic. And I've got to respectfully disagree with that premise. To me, that would be like the person who says, well, I have anger issues and I yell at people all the time. And if I were to act any differently, that wouldn't be authentic of me. Well, that's malarkey. That's, it's, all that means is that person has an authentic problem that they need to authentically work on to become a better, higher, more effective, authentic version of themselves. So we never want people to use the term authentic or authenticity as an excuse for not growing, not improving themselves, but rather use it as impetus to become your highest self. Again, my defining terms, like I do all the time, I define authenticity very simply. That is simply acting congruently with your values. And I think if you do that, you're always on the right track. And now the fifth law, the final law, which brings it all home, is the law of receptivity. And the law of receptivity says the key to effective giving is to stay open to receiving. This is really, Eric, understanding nothing more than that you breathe out, you also have to breathe in.
Yep.
Right? It's not one or the other. It's both. You breathe out carbon dioxide. You breathe in oxygen. You breathe out, which is giving. You breathe in, which is receiving. Giving and receiving are not opposite concepts. They're simply two sides of the very same coin, and they work in tandem. Now, the problem is that the world overall does not give us that message. The world around us gives us an absolutely negative, anti-prosperity message on a constant, continual basis. And this is, we get this all our life. For many people, it's a combination of upbringing, environment, schooling, news media, television shows, movies, popular culture, cultural mores, social media, where you would think that anybody who does well financially has done it on the backs of others or took advantage of others or did things nefariously. Now, it's a big world. People do things in ways we don't agree with. Okay. But, and there's different ways to attain different types of success. But no, most people who do very, very, very well financially, and they have a sustainably financially successful business, they do it because they've been able to find a way to provide immense value to the lives of many people, placing the customer's interest first and being authentic in their acting congruent in their values. Okay. But again, it's not a message we receive. Look at how, in politics, look at how, remember the messages we kept seeing about how millionaires shouldn't exist. That is just, on the face of it, economically, if you've studied basic economics, that just doesn't even make sense. Because for someone to be a millionaire, and let's say again, as most people do, they created that honestly by doing what? Providing a product or service that other people willingly purchase because they felt it would make their life better in some way to have that product. So they willingly exchange their money for it, right? So this person who becomes a millionaire, they probably employ a bunch of people, right? And those people take that job because they feel they're better off having that job than not having that job. They make a certain amount of money, which they then spend in their community, or it could be on Amazon.com, or it could be anywhere they want. They could be buying your coffee, however they want. And what that does is then that puts money and increase in the hands of others who are able to then, it's just such a beautiful thing. And it's brought so many record numbers of people out of poverty, right? And provided abundance to so many. And yet that's, that's always, it's like money, prosperity, abundance is so looked down on. A friend of mine, Randy Gage, who's an abundance and prosperity authority, he does this great vignette about movies, that in most hit movies, there are typically two types of characters. There are the good people who are usually portrayed as hardworking, good people. They're honest, but they're poor. They're poor but happy. Okay. And they're always being taken advantage of by who? The evil rich person who is just some money grubbing, evil capitalist who just wants nothing more than to harm everybody else as he's raking in his, right? I mean, that's kind of what you see. And these are the messages that get out. He gives one great example, by the way, of how it's so subliminal. And when I say that, by the way, I'm not talking about a conspiracy type of thing of people. I'm just saying it's just how it is. It's just how things naturally play out. It's what sells. Okay. So he talks about, and so how some of these messages can really get into people's minds. So he gives he gives a lot of great examples, but one of them is in the first Spider-Man movie. Peter Parker and his Uncle Ben are sitting in the living room, and they're talking and about, being poor. And Uncle Ben says, well, Peter, we may not be rich, but at least we're honest. What a horrible, horrible anti-prosperity message for some 13-year-old boy or girl to see, right? Because what's the presupposition there? That if you're honest, a good person, you've got no chance of making any money and living a comfortable life where you can have freedom to do the things that you want, right? But if you're rich, you must have done something wrong to get it. So, now, somebody might say, well, but that's just a movie. Well, first, no, it's pretty much every movie and every TV show and everything in popular culture and everything you see on the internet, not right? So this gets into the head, not just in the conscious, which is bad enough, but more insidiously in the unconscious, the subconscious.
Right.
That's what directs things. Hey, that's what runs the show. And we don't even know it. So you've got a person who grows up and has all these mind viruses, prosperity, mind viruses going in their head, and they start to do good in the world, and they can see the money starting to maybe come in. But then, and again, this is always unconscious, okay? Unconsciously, they're saying, well, wait a second, though. If I make money, what does that say about me? What did I do that was dishonest? Who did I hurt to get this? Who did I take advantage of? What will my friends think of me, right? And so what do? They kind of sabotage their success. So all this is very, it's very underneath the surface, which makes it more difficult. Now, my suggestion, if I may, and we covered it on a surface level in the Go Giver, and that was fine. But my suggestion is to make a study of prosperity consciousness. Okay, there's nothing woo-woo about this. This is very, very important stuff. There are people out there like Randy Gage, like Lisa Peterson, like David Nagel, the late Bob Proctor, Sharon Lecter, people who just do, a friend of mine, Ellen Rogan in Chicago, people who just do a wonderful, magnificent job writing about, blogging about, doing videos, having courses where they teach the prosperity mindset. And 99% of what they do is simply how to get past those mental blocks to prosperity that we're not even aware we have. So, so receptivity is also a very, very important part of being a go-giver. And now the focus is on the giving, right? The focus is on the value you're providing. But then it's allowing ourselves to receive with gratitude.
Throughout the book, especially back when I first started, something that really spoke to me and stuck out was mentorship. And you mentioned a drive-by mentor changed your mindset. What did they say?
Yeah, so this is really funny. So drive-by mentor is a term that came about. I was on the phone with another mentor of mine, or it might have been a Zoom thing or whatever, but her name is Dondi Scumaci, and she is a great leadership speaker, practitioner, speaks at companies all over the world. She's fantastic. And I think the term came from her. I'm not sure, but I think it did. And usually she says something brilliant and I agree with it. And we're talking about a drive-by mentor as being different from a traditional mentor, in that a drive-by mentor is simply someone who just happens, you may not even know this person, or you might know them indirectly, but you don't have any kind of relationship with them necessarily, but they happen to say something at the exact time you need to hear it, and it sinks in, and you may never see them again or whatever. But so what happened was, I had been in sales for a couple of years after a miserable start because I had no idea how to sell. I had no training in it. I had started reading books, listening. Back then it was tapes, cassette tapes, going to seminars. I did really well. But a couple of years later, I switched jobs, went to work for a company, and I started out in a slump. And I made a young salesperson's mistake in that I was so focused on getting out of my slump that it became all about me instead of about my customers, right? And so, of course, nobody buys from me because you want to get out of a slump. So my slump continued. So one day I come back to the office, and there was a guy there who I kind of knew. He was an older guy. He was not in the sales department. I think he was an engineer, and I think he soon retired after that. Nice guy, quiet guy. One of these people who, and we've all known people like this, I think. He didn't say much, but whenever he did say something, it was always profound, right? And I think he saw me as sort of Joe, the salesperson and the go-giver, who I would write about, with John 20 years after that, or whatever it was, 25 years after that. And he saw me as that kind of young, up and coming, ambitious, aggressive sales guy with a good heart, but whose focus was totally in the wrong place. And he said to me, Berg, he was a last name kind of guy. He said, Berg, can I give you some advice? And I said, yeah, please do. I badly need it. And he said, Berg, if you want to make a lot of money in sales, he said, don't have making money as your target. Your target is serving others. Now, when you hit the target, he said, you'll get a reward, and that reward will come in the form of money, and you can do with that money whatever you choose. But never forget, he said, the money is simply the reward for hitting the target. It ain't the target itself. Your target is serving others. And Eric, what that said to me was that great salesmanship is never about the salesperson. Great salesmanship is never about the product or service. As important as the product or service is, and it is, it's just never what it's about. Great salesmanship is about the other person. It's about that person whose life you're trying to add value to. Or perhaps even more accurately, we could say it's about that person whose life becomes a little bit better just because you are part of it. And I think that when we approach sales, when we approach leadership, when we approach life from that foundational premise, now we're really 9 steps ahead of the game in a 10-step game.
So true. Absolutely. One of the things that jumped off the page for me throughout reading all this is, why do you believe liberty and free markets are the key to prosperity and safety?
Well, okay, so liberty itself, to me, is the highest moral political value, because as human beings, we are built to want to be free. Right? We are built to want to own our lives. Now, that's on an earthly level. If we believe in God, I do, I know you do, then we believe, God is right in charge, right? But as human beings, autonomy, sovereignty, ownership of our own lives is just, it's what we value. It's why people will leave everything behind, okay, like my ancestors did in their own country, okay, and come over here with nothing, come to a more free country, okay, because autonomy is that important, okay? Anytime we collectively force our will on someone else, to me, it's immoral. Now, in the proper context, so let me just explain, if I may. I define liberty, because again, it all comes down to definitions, right? I define liberty as the right to live one's life however and in whatever way one sees fit in their pursuit of happiness, providing they don't infringe upon the right of anyone else to do the same. Okay. So if we go from that premise, that's why I believe liberty is the highest moral political value. Okay. Now, on a practical level, it's the highest value, highest political value, because it's the one that results in the most prosperity for all. Again, when people are left to, when government provides its purposeful function of protecting the public from outside invasion and from force and fraud, internal force and fraud. Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution basically says that, okay? That the role of government is protect from outside and domestic violence. And when they say domestic violence, in that case, they mean, robbery or fraud or in some ways. So when they do that, when they fulfill their legitimate, and of course, as domestic violence is used today, that also is something government. But I'm just saying that in the way the founders wrote it, that's what they meant. They were saying legitimate function is protect us from outside invasion and domestic force and fraud. Okay, But to otherwise, and they need to do that, but to otherwise leave people free to conduct business with, be in relationship with, whatever, however people want. So again, government's job is to provide the foundation for people to be free, right? Providing that they don't infringe upon the rights of anyone else. Do the same. That's it. Okay, so when that happens, people can exchange value with one another however they see fit. It means some people are going to like this kind of food and they're going to buy this kind of food, and other people are going to buy this kind of food and they're not going to see value in that kind of food. Okay. It means they can have a relationship with one company because while the price may not be as low, the service is better, and that's what brings them more happiness, the service aspect, and not have a relationship with this other company that might have a lower price, but whose service is lousy. Okay. Again, it leaves people free to do business with one another. And when that happens, 1 + 1 = 3. Value plus value equals greater value. When you try to centrally plan and tell people what they can do, who they can be in relationship with, who they can buy for, right? What you're doing is now it's a limited pie, because since it's force, people know that they've got to grab their piece of the pie before someone else gets it. So value's not created, it's lessened. Now, you would think that after the Soviet Union, Cuba, China, North Korea, Vietnam, North Vietnam, you think with all these things and you see such horrendous poverty and unhappiness in these countries, that most Western people in Western society would kind of get the idea that maybe force doesn't work when it comes to government. Maybe central planning doesn't work. Maybe freedom does, because everywhere there's actually freedom, to the degree that there's freedom, there is prosperity. To the degree that there's less freedom, there's less prosperity. So you'd think this is what, but unfortunately, I say unfortunately, but that's not necessarily how the world works. For so many people, it's what they feel should be right, not what is right. What they feel should be reality. And I think one thing we see is that the most successful people in life, they deal in reality. As Ben Shapiro says, facts don't care about your feelings. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean that when we communicate with someone that we shouldn't care about their feelings. We always want to communicate in a way that we respect others' feelings. Okay. But that doesn't mean that we compromise on principle and on values.
So to be respectful of time, because we're blowing through the hour that we've got scheduled for this, want to do a quick rapid fire section, just call it tactical takeaways, if you will. What is one sentence that prevents misunderstanding?
It's asking people to define what they mean, but doing it in a kind and tactful way. So in other words, it's saying to somebody, just for my own clarification, when you say blank, what exactly do you mean, or how exactly do you mean that? Because what happens if we don't do that, then we both might be defining what that person said in two different ways, and we don't even know it, right? So we have this conflict, and we think we're arguing about the same thing when we're really arguing about two different things. So we always need to make sure that we understand exactly what that person means by what they said. So again, we do it tactfully, just for my own clarification, or just so I don't misunderstand. When you say blank, and then you say, what exactly do you mean, or could you tell me exactly how, and we do it that way. And now we're coming from a premise of understanding.
Awesome. How do you say no kindly?
Well, so, this can be difficult because most of us, we want to please others. We don't want to let people down. And yet there's some times when we really don't have either the time or the energy or the desire to do something that someone's asking us to do. Let's say, can I share an example? And I think it will be easier that way.
Absolutely.
Let's say someone asks you to serve on a committee. It could be for school, could be for work, could be for something. Okay. It's not something you have to do, but it's something they would like you to do. And they ask you, but you don't want to. Now, for whatever reason, it doesn't matter. For whatever reason, you'd rather not. Now, there's there's one way of saying no that people have been saying for a while now, and that is to, no is a complete sentence, right? And they say just, now what they mean by that is, I think that it's okay to say no, but to say no is a complete sentence in terms of, I don't think that's really the right way to do it for a couple of reasons. One is it's rude. If somebody asks you to serve there, no. Is that a complete sentence? Well, I mean, literally, I guess, but, but also, this person's asking you to do something, you don't want to, you may not want to, if you just say no, you're going to turn that person off to any future things that could, opportunities. You may not want to do that. Okay. But mainly you don't say no that way because it's incongruent with your personal value system of showing people respect. Okay. Now, another way, so I wouldn't suggest no as a complete sentence. Another way people will advise to say no is to just, a little lie like, well, I would, but I don't have the time. The problem with that, aside from the fact that, you do have the time, if we have the time, we make the time to do what we want to do. What it is that you don't value doing the thing as much as you value not doing it. And when the other person now, when they answer your objection in a compelling way that shows that time won't be an issue, now you're stuck. Now you've either got to admit that you are fibbing, or you have to, in order to save face, you've got to take on this assignment that you don't want to do. Again, that's not what we want to do. Also, when you say you don't have the time, what if they say, oh, okay, well, we're going to do it again in a few months. I'll circle back then. You've just kicked the can down the road. So let's look at a way we can say no. And I'm going to just share this, Eric. If you'll really take this to heart, this is a game changer, because it will free you up for the rest of your life when you don't want to do something. Let's
Love it.
Again, the person asks you to serve on a committee. Okay. And you simply say, thank you so much for asking. While it's not something I'd like to take on, please know how honored I am to be asked. And that's it. Because what you've done is you very respectfully, you thank them, you told them how honored you are, so you complimented them, and you let them know, in no uncertain terms, but in a very respectful way, that it wasn't something you were going to do. What you didn't do is make an excuse for them to hang their hat on and be able to answer as an objection. So by and large, you can say it a little bit differently depending upon your style. It might be, thank you. While it's not something I choose to take on, please know how grateful I am that you would think of me. So the wording doesn't have to be tough, but if you keep it pretty much like that, wow, it will set you free.
That's gold right there.
Thank you.
What is one phrase or book that has changed your life?
Well, a book that I would highly, highly recommend people is called Living Untethered by Michael A. Singer. Now, he's written a number of books, and they're all great, okay? And the one that most people are familiar with is called The Untethered Soul. Great book. But it's his third one, and it's called Living Untethered. And I'm telling you, and I'm 67, I've probably been studying personal development now for, 40 years since I started in sales. I've never read a book that has touched me that deeply in terms of understanding myself, understanding others, getting to work through some of my own stuff inside that I really, have for years tried to work on and had not been successful with it. I cannot recommend it highly enough.
Awesome. I love book recommendations, and that's one I will definitely be putting on my list. So, Bob, one thing I try to do with every interview is ask this question, especially from guests that I deeply admire. Who's someone you think I should interview next? I know you've had a brief introduction to some of my past and history through our email exchanges. I'm always trying to learn, grow, and serve better. I love to connect with others in networks that share similar heart, generosity, leadership, and values-driven entrepreneurship.
So there's a guy named Richard Weilman, Weylman, who I think you would just love. He's the author of a book called 100 Proven Ways to Acquire and Keep Clients for Life. I actually did the forward for the book, and I never do these, but I've been a fan of his for 30 years. He was also in the service, so would be very relatable.
Very cool.
Just a really good human being. And very, very successful. To me, he's just such a go-giver personified. So I think you might enjoy it. His website is Richard, and then Weylman is Weylman. Richard Weylman.
Awesome. Well, Bob, as we wrap up, if somebody wanted to learn more or follow you, where would you direct them?
I would just direct them to Burg, BURG.com, and they can subscribe if they'd like to my free daily email and, have fun searching the site. Lots of resources, free chapters of the book so that you can get to know if you like where it's headed and so forth. So yeah, Burg,
Well, sir, it is truly an honor to be able to sit here and share some time with you. Being selfish, I could go for easily a couple more hours, but
thank you.
I'd be respectful of your time. Thank you for taking the opportunity to sit down and chat with me today. This truly means the world to me, and I appreciate that. So, as we wrap, thank you for everyone for joining us today on yet another episode of Brewing Better Days, the Coffee Shop Talk podcast. My name's Eric Hadley. I'm your host, Bob Burg. It has been an honor. Thank you, sir.
The honor was mine. Thank you so much, Eric.
I appreciate you. Y'all have a great day. And until next time, stay pro-caffeinated.
You've been listening to Brewing Better Days. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit us up on Instagram at Brewing Better Days and check the website at www.brewingbetterdays.com. Hey, life's hard, but it sure is easier with a nice cup of coffee. See you next time on Brewing Better Days.